Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babiar, and I'm the Training Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you're a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded Great Commission worker. My guest today is Mark Wilson, who is the new Managing Director of Support Raising Solutions. And Mark has not been on the podcast too many times before, but he definitely has a lot of knowledge and wisdom and input that hopefully he'll be a continued guest into the future. Mark has recently moved from Colorado to Northwest Arkansas, so he exchanged really big mountains for really tiny mountains, but warmer weather. So, Mark, my friend, welcome back.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here. And I enjoy the green of Arkansas rather than the dry brown of Colorado. So
yeah,
we didn't lose everything.
No. And you got good mountain biking here too.
That's the truth.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I invited you to come on this podcast with me today to talk about a number of things, but I think our main focus for at least this conversation just has to do with input. When people are raising support, a lot of times there are people that have opinions and thoughts. Some are wise, some are very unwise. And sometimes people will share those with you, whether you want them or not. And other times people won't share because they don't want to tell you how to do different things. And yet you and I both know from experience that support raising can be a rather lonely journey if we don't interact with other people that know a thing or two about the topic.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think there's so much to be had in benefit from other people. They make you better. But at the same time, the wrong people can discourage you, dishearten you, and really demoralize what you're doing. So I think parsing those things is what we're trying to do here today.
Absolutely. One of the things that I hope people are mindful of is you are not the only person who's ever set out to raise support. As isolating as what it can feel like, the reality is there are thousands, tens of thousands of missionaries in the world right now who are spiritually healthy, vision-driven, and fully funded. And God has not ran out of money, by the way. He literally owns everything, so we don't have to worry about that. But you do need to figure out how you also can be spiritually healthy, vision-driven, and fully funded. But that doesn't mean necessarily that everybody around you in your circle is full of wonderful advice. So, Mark, how do we get help? How do people that are in that support raising stage, whether they're first timers or they've been in it for a while, they need to kind of do a little maintenance and raise a little bit more? How do people just kind of even gauge that? What's a good filter?
Well, I think if you get to a place where you find people asking the same questions in your presentation over and over again, then you probably have a dead spot or a place that's not clear. And so those are the kinds of things I think you should look for, is similar responses that people are unclear about what you're asking or what you're doing. That could be an indicator that it's time to ask for some outside input.
Good thought. Yeah, in fact, that makes me think of a buddy of mine named Corey from Boise, Idaho, who a couple years ago reached out to me and said, Aaron, everybody's responding with this thing. And I honestly don't remember what that thing was, but I remember thinking, I'm glad you're asking. Give me your presentation. And as soon as he did, man, it was so obvious to me what it was he was leaving out, what was eliciting that question, both in what he was saying that was causing questions and also even in what he wasn't saying. And so he really handled that wisely and even being, well, let's be honest, humble.
Yep.
And willing to reach out and ask for help.
And I think, Aaron, you hit on maybe the most important thing in this whole podcast we're going to do. You have to be one to want input. You really genuinely have to want it. And two, you have to be humble enough to hear what you don't know and can't see on your own. And you guys, I don't know if you're familiar, look up Jahari's window on Google someplace, but it talks about the things we can see, the things other people see, and the things we're blind to.
What's that called?
It's called Jahari's window.
Jahari's window.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's a 4-quadrant thing, but it goes over the stages of what we know about ourselves and what we're blind to.
Okay.
But there's a quadrant in there that we're blind to things and we can't see. And that's where we need community is to help us reflect on those things. Now, the kind of community you ask, we'll talk about later, but you have to be humble and you've got to genuinely want to see and believe that you don't see everything on your own.
That is really hard for someone, I believe, to grasp, partly because if you have, quote unquote, what we would say, if you've done it right, meaning you've read the God Ask or maybe one of Scott Morton's books, and maybe you've got some great training. It doesn't have to be an SRS boot camp. Obviously, we think everybody should go through that or something similar. And maybe you have a coach, maybe you don't, but you've already spent hours, if not weeks, trying to become a better expert at inviting people to partner with you in ministry. And now all of a sudden, I don't want to say the wheels are falling off, but you're not exactly flying down the road. Something's not going right. That can kind of hurt your pride a little bit to go, man, after all this time, I still need help. Oh, God, why can't you just fund me already? Just give me the money, Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, and there is an emotional side to this too. And I think the Lord, it's sort of like the Israelites. They would do things after a while the same way. Remember, they would take the ark out to battle because that's how they won.
All right.
Well, then one time they took the ark out to battle and they lost the ark. I think sometimes we can trust the model and not trust the Lord in the model. And I think that's when you get to those emotional places, we got to check what it is and who we're trusting in for those things to happen.
Right. I want to point out a resource that not all of our listeners have probably read. If you're eager to work hard to develop a solid, faithful support team to undergird your ministry for the long haul, you might want to pick up a copy of the book called Viewpoints. It's compiled and authored by Steve Shadrack, and this book called Viewpoints is filled with encouraging case studies and anecdotes that will encourage you in the support raising process. You can pick up Viewpoints at cmmpress.org, where you can receive a 10% discount if you use the code SRS Podcast.
I want to interrupt this podcast for a brief heads up. This is Steve Shadrack, author of The God Ask. Support Raising Solutions is running a contest to win an SRS swag pack. Go check out our past podcast episode, number 29, to get details on how you can get involved and possibly win some fun Support Raising Solutions swag, including a $100 gift card.
Mark, some of our listeners are working with an organization that provides some sort of structure. There might already be a person who provides some coaching. There might also be somebody who will provide some accountability. You and I have talked before that we're hoping that doesn't have to be the same person. That can be kind of hard on that person if it is. But in any event, finding somebody that actually knows what they're talking about, that's pretty key in all this, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think, you have to be careful. Like I read a quote yesterday that said, if you wouldn't take advice from this person, you probably shouldn't receive criticism from them either. So as a principle, look who the people who are having the greatest success, people you respect and trust, and also people who aren't afraid to tell you the truth, because you can get a lot of positive feedback that doesn't help you move forward and get the knowledge you need to get better.
Right. Or you might just get bad coaching.
It can happen.
It can happen. My favorite horrible example, and the guilty shall remain nameless, is I do have a friend who was raising support a few years back, and he actually hired a quote-unquote coach, a support-raising coach, who told him to go print little table tents with his contact information and go place that on tables in various coffee shops and go home and pray and see who called him to invite to his support team. I'm still at a loss as to why somebody thought that was a great use of his time and his resources. That was some pretty terrible support raising coaching, to be honest with you. And as I dug into that, and I didn't go too far, I knew there was all kinds of problems, but the reality is the person who'd been hired to coach him in raising his support had never raised support before. didn't know what they were talking about. Someone had said, "Oh, you're a good coach. Here, you can coach this," and they didn't really have any validity or integrity in having the right person. And so we say, yeah, you want to find a coach, you want to be humble, and you want to be willing to listen and learn. Well, we also would say you need to kind of vet who that coach is, what their credentials are, right?
Absolutely. It's the most important thing. And I think I would say this, you should receive input based on their level of expertise. So if you have a donor who says, hey, I think you could improve this, take their input and match it against what they know. There is value in what they say, but make sure that you filter it. Now, don't filter out everything negative, but filter out, and you got to make sure. And then if you've got a veteran missionary who is fully funded, has tons of experience, and they give you some technical advice, you pay a lot more attention to that because of their expertise. And so I think just even appropriating their knowledge and skill level with their comment will really help you vet who is a good person.
Yeah. Another thought I have along those lines is, so you find somebody that's like that. They're a grizzled veteran, so to speak. That's one of my favorite terms. So they're a grizzled veteran in support raising, but they also have to have the time and the willingness to work with you. They might have to listen to your entire presentation. That could be a time issue. They might also be a little bit too sweet and kind. I mean, we all want warm fuzzies. We want people to say nice things to us, but we need to find somebody who lovingly, in the name of Jesus, is willing to be honest, if not maybe even a little bit ruthless, not because they're trying to harm us or injure us, but because they want us to be successful in our Great Commission work.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think we can help people be honest. I think you can give them things to look for. Are there points where I'm unclear? Are there transitions that are awkward? Should I have been bolder or stronger? Am I going too long? I think you can ask those kinds of questions in the beginning. So it gives them very specific things. And I got some input about 2 weeks ago from someone, and I could tell they wanted to say, I don't know if you ever get that where somebody's thinking. And so I just said, sounds like you want to say something to me more about my presentation. And this person, thank goodness, responded and said, yes, here's something I noticed that I didn't understand.
That's awesome.
So I think you can invite, if you notice that like they're mulling and they're trying not to hurt your feelings, invite them to give that input and say, hey, I really want to hear it.
Yeah. Giving them the freedom, even asking for that can be very eye-opening because, yeah, you don't know what you can't see. We all develop blind spots a little bit. In fact, I know that it's somewhat common for people to go away from a support raising training like the SRS boot camp and really have this wonderful, clear, concise presentation that's meant to be more of a conversation, and they're ready to go. They're ready to run down those rails, and then 4, 6, 8 weeks later, all of a sudden their presentation has been tweaked, perhaps to the point that it's ineffective. They've changed it almost too much, but they can't see it. They can't see it because they've been in the thick of it so much. That's a time when they really need to get some help, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think you get used to it and you become inoculated to it, and you're on rote. You're kind of on cruise control, and I think it's better to be active and be aware and continuing that because every support conversation is different, right? And so, yeah, I don't know that I have a ton to say on that particular point, but I think you're right. Active participation is better than rote cruise control participation.
Mark, we still have a few minutes here, and I want to kind of dig in on this idea of pursuing help. We have probably some listeners that are not from a large organization, and they don't already have someone that they know who could coach them. But then we also probably have people who are with an organization, and they're not wanting to be disrespectful, but they're not actually getting much coaching or help from the people that are their quote-unquote superiors. I'm just going to ask you just to kind of speak into both of those situations.
Sure. Great. I think the first thing that I would love you to zoom out from who first and say, what is it exactly that you're not feeling good at or skilled at? And so let's say you're struggling with communication, or you're struggling with commitment or passion or clarity. Once you identify the skill set, look and ask and find people who have that skill set. It's called selective mentoring. You choose the mentor based on their, and so I think in the support raising world, who is fully funded? Whose mission presentation, vision presentation have you heard that was fantastic that you would love to go talk to? So
maybe it's a missionary that you're currently supporting that invited you to their team years ago.
That's exactly what I was thinking. As you know, or even it could be there are other people that have some of these skill sets. But so if you're in that realm where you don't have people, that's one. But I think you need to look for people who are in that skill set. You get better by being with people who are better than you.
Okay.
Yep. And then the second scenario was if you have a coach.
Yeah, or you're in an organization that maybe they don't actually identify that as the coach. Maybe it's just like, here's your supervisor. If you have questions, ask them. But you're sensing that might be a wonderful person that loves Jesus and they're really good at their job, but they might not be so talented at coaching you, at helping you with your support raising process. How do you respectfully get some help?
Yeah, I think you are not confined to that single situation. Very few organizations are going to tell you that you can't seek learning. I think you respect that. You do everything that person has asked for. You engage with them. You're a good employee. And you go and you look, again, you can seek out a veteran missionary. You can seek out a successful missionary. They're like, you can just say, hey, look, and you maybe like them more. I'm learning. I want to talk to this person. I want to talk to that person.
Right.
And maybe even ask if they have any recommendations as well. And I think you can include them in that process. But be a good, responsible supervisee first and then seek input later.
Yeah. No, that's wise. The reality is I know a guy who's a supervisor that oversees a team of roughly 10 people, and he would probably be one of the first people to tell you, I'm not a very good support raising coach. That's a part of my job, but I'm actually not that great at it. And the fact that he was willing to own that, I think it probably helped some of his team members, people that answer to him, feel a freedom to get some outside help, to ask other people questions. I don't think he was trying to abdicate his role completely. I think it was more of a mindset of, man, I love people and I want people on my team to be spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded, and I'm not that great of a one-to-one support coach. So there is a skill set involved with it. And some people are a little more natural at it. But all of us that are doing coaching need to grow at it. And I would certainly put yourself and myself in that category too. We're not, quote unquote, the experts because we work with support raising solutions.
Yeah, we're in the process of learning. And I would say, look for people who are constantly learning. Like static is good for a season when it works, but if you don't continue to develop, it becomes outdated. Or again, we talked about trusting in the model more than the Lord, and I think you gotta keep growing and advancing in that. And one other thing I would throw out is that advice isn't always people. Sometimes it's a resource, and Support Raising Solutions has fantastic resources, podcast, books, blogs, and then you've got Scott Moore. I mean, look out there and again, filter who you would read based on would you take advice and criticism. But there's some things that you can give yourself input on by listening and asking if you're doing some of those things. Or the other thought I had, there is some value in your peers in your mission who are raising support, asking where have they found solutions? What do they get stuck with? How have they handled a certain situation? Yeah. So I think there's...
Particularly if they are fully funded. If they're perpetually underfunded, maybe they aren't the people you ask.
Right. Yeah. But I think there's wisdom, like you said. I just didn't want to make it only veterans. I think there are other rookies who are doing a good job.
Good word.
That you can learn from as well.
Good word. Well, I'll close just with affirming everything you just said, and even give a shout out. I don't recall his name, but we had a guy recently, Mark, that came to a Support Raising Solutions boot camp in I believe we were in Charlotte, North Carolina, and when he came to the boot camp, he goes, "Oh, hey, I feel like we're already friends." And I said, "Wait, what?" And he goes, "I've been listening to all the podcasts." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's cool." He goes, "No, all of them. I've listened to all of them." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And I was like, "So you've been to a boot camp before?" He goes, "No, I've never been trained." I said, "Wait, what?" And he goes, "I knew I needed to get help. I wasn't getting it from my organization. I was literally just searching like the iTunes and podcasts and trying to find something on nonprofit and support raising. I stumbled on this. I'm a part of a missions organization in the 1040 window. I listened to every podcast and I realized, wow, I got to keep growing. And so I scheduled my flight back to the U.S. to be around a time that I could go to a boot camp. This is a guy that never even heard of Support Raising Solutions before. He just stumbled upon the podcast. But what a great example, not just because he went to a boot camp, but what a great example of somebody who is looking outside of what's right in front of his face for help, for information, for training. And I think he was even talking about trying to find a coach afterwards.
Yeah, and I think he exemplifies that what really underlies all of this is you can accept mediocrity and, and lie to yourself, or you can say, this can be better and I can be better and the Lord can help me be a professional at my craft and understand that raising support is part of a missionary's job and you need to be good at it so that you are fully funded and can do the rest of your job as well as possible. And I love that story. And that's really what we want underneath all of this is a desire for you to be good at this because it helps your supporters know what you're doing better and helps you get better at your job.
Yeah. Well, Mark, my friend, it's a joy to effort with you for the sake of the kingdom. I know that neither one of us are in it for the money, not by a long stretch, and yet we definitely want to see people seek the Lord and be spiritually healthy and vision-driven and fully funded. And I know this podcast is an encouragement to many. So my friends that are listening to this, I would just encourage you, if you have friends or people you know in ministry that are struggling with their support, please turn them on to our podcast or encourage them to attend an SRS boot camp. We want to equip ministry leaders to survive and thrive. We believe in the Great Commission, and we're just co-laborers in it. And so it's an honor to have you as a guest today, Mark, and it's an honor to partner with you via Support Raising Solutions. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me. What a fun event and a meaningful thing we get to do here.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. Please visit supportraisengsolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcasts from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining your personal support team.